Okay, so good morning. Hello, everyone.
To the second day of this year's FAR, al Fòrum d'Habitatge i Rehabilitació de Barcelona
The
2022.
Housing and Rehabilitation Forum of Barcelona 2022. Thanks for being with us one more day. Today we will continue from where we left it yesterday on housing policies, and we will go into rehabilitation and sustainability. We'll start off with a panel to share reflections around these issues, and we will also link them to the European Next Generation Recovery Funds to look at what is being done here and also in other parts of the world. Housing is a global challenge, and learning from other cities, opening up our perspective and sharing and comparing experiences is essential if we want to achieve real and effective change and to respond to the urgent needs of the present times. So we will start off with this first panel of the second day of FAR 2022, which has as a title, Rehabilitating with Social and Environmental Criteria. I will be moderating this session, and I will have very interesting panelists. I'll introduce you one by one, and you can come up on stage so that we know who is who, and you can take a seat. First, we have Anaïs Bas. She is an architect with a postgraduate in informal cities and social architecture. She is a member of the Cyclica Cooperative, which I'm sure you know, where she coordinates projects on energy transition in the field of town planning and rehabilitation, with a special focus on energy culture and citizen participation. So Anaïs, if you want to come up on stage. Then we have Albert Sagrera, who is the chair of BATEC. He is the environmental advising architecture of Societat Orgànica, which is a pioneering organization, and it's something we want to value today. And he is coordinating the Green Office of COAG, the Bar of Architects of Catalonia. Then we have Celia Galera, who is a founding member and the director of the group Habitat Futura, an organization that carries out strategic projects based on the premises of sustainable development for social and economic change. She is also the founding member and developer of Ilha Eficient Cooperative and creator of the Innova Think to Reason, and she will be telling us how these projects have a social engagement and an impact on how we can move closer to citizens, as you were telling us before. And last we have Isabella Longo, and she told me not to say this out loud, but she is an engineer. And I think it's great that we have a diversity and hear different opinions, because we need all disciplines and all areas to participate in finding a solution to the right to decent housing and to minimize the environmental footprint of architecture. So it's important to have Isabella with us. She is an engineer, has a master's degree in town planning and policies for the environment. She directs projects and Bit Habitat and from the Urban Innovation Center from the City Council of Barcelona. So now we have our panelists up on stage. Let's give them a round. How are you doing? Are you okay? Good morning. So now we will be able to hear your presentations and we'll hear about your projects and your experiences. And after that, I'd like to recall that we would like to allow everyone to participate in all sessions. If you want to ask any questions, you can go into your browser and type www.menti.com, and then with this password you will be able to enter the platform, write your questions, and then we'll screen them so that we can have a debate. Yesterday it was really interesting. I mean, there were many questions from our audience, and we'd love it if today was the same. And before we kick off with the presentations and the questions from the audience and the debate, I'd like to give you some background. It's important to be aware that the construction sector represents 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. In Spain alone, 45 million tons of waste from demolitions are generated every year. It's as if we said that without knowing, each of us generate 1 million tons of waste coming from construction every year. It's crazy. We also know that buildings use 50% of energy, materials, and 33% of water. So, bearing these figures in mind, if we look at the environmental footprint of architecture and construction, well then I'm sure we will all agree that refurbishing must be a pillar today and in the future of architecture, especially in Western consolidated cities like ours. The most sustainable thing is to give a new life to existing buildings. So refurbishing and maintaining buildings in our cities, making them healthier, more comfortable and more sustainable, and improving their energy performance and reducing their environmental footprint is important. And we will also be talking about the social side, the social value behind refurbishing, because the buildings that are in greatest need of refurbishment are those that are lived in by people who directly experience social inequality. So there's a clear social aspect, and refurbishing also allows to bring cohesion into our cities, to preserve our heritage and our identity as a society, and to grow ties between citizens who feel identified with architecture and with the city around them. Then there's also an economic component. Usually, refurbishing is cheaper than building from scratch, and if we look at the energy side, we should reduce energy consumption costs. Having an A energy certification can reduce consumption up to 90%, and therefore also the cost compared to class G building. And this is all very important, but we also know that 99.9% of buildings in Catalonia, and these were the figures that I came up with from some information that was passed on to me by the regional government, 99.9% of buildings in Catalonia and 95% of buildings built since 1980 are failure from the energy perspective. So we have a lot of work to do, especially more so if we bear in mind the goals set for 2030. So in the light of the climate crisis and the challenge of having access to decent housing for all, refurbishing is and must be a priority. But how can we do this? How can we have a good energy efficient, or how can we bring in environmental and social criteria into refurbishment? And that is precisely what our panelists will be telling us of. And without further ado, I'll give them the floor so they can share their presentations and experiences. Let's start off with Anaïs, for instance. The floor is yours, Anaïs. Thanks, Nuria. Okay, thanks, Nuria, for that introduction. I'd like to thank the organizers for having invited us. My presentation, if I guess it's almost ready. There we go. Is this your presentation? Yes? Great, okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I will talk about the building passport. It's a new European tool, which I'm sure you've heard of, with a focus on accompanying and supporting communities. I was told I had 10 minutes, so I'll give you a brief introduction to these new European instruments, the digital book and the passport of the building, and how we are merging with the social support and the digital support. So I will share a platform for the digital support, which we developing. We just have a prototype, and when it comes to in-person support, I will be sharing with you a case study from l'Hospitalet de Llobregat. So the new European instruments, the building passport and the digital booklet are instruments that come from the European Directive of Energy Efficiency. For 2023, there must be a first European framework, and then in 2024, all states must have their plan for the building passport and the digital book. And from Cyclica, together with GMC, we've been working precisely to look at how we can translate this directive into Spanish national legislation with the energy certifications, which at the end of the day are a tool that haven't been as relevant as they should have been. So we came up with a proposal to define the digital book and the passport. The Building's digital book is a digital tool that acts as a common registry for all of the relevant data during the building's life cycle, and it must serve as a tool of communication between all of the stakeholders involved in rehabilitation works. And the refurbishment passport is a tool to support the communities so as to achieve the goals of decarbonization by 2050. So with this comprehensive view of placing the communities at the center, where people are the protagonists in their buildings, as Nuria said, buildings that are in greater need of refurbishment are the ones lived in by more vulnerable collectives, and these communities, these people need to be able to communicate their needs so that we can find answers to their needs. So with this comprehensive view to consider, give equal consideration to the building and the people living in it, to promote cohesion, and in Europe it includes a building rehabilitation and a digital book of building, and we thought that here in Spain it would be necessary to include a plan to accompany or to support the community of neighbours living in these buildings. Then I'll explain why it's important to support the communities, although I guess we will all agree that communities must come together and agree, and for this to happen, communities need to be well informed and there must be a community cohesion, and that is why for the time being we have come up with a prototype for a digital platform both for the communities and the actors involved in refurbishment and the administrations. It's being developed at the moment. We have a first module for communities. This platform is made up of a database on the building, and it aims at coming up with a social diagnostic of the community and a physical diagnosis of the building. There's a refurbishment plan, the financial plan, and the support plan. So let me introduce the landing of this prototype. So far we have worked with two municipalities, El Prat de Llobregat and Mataró, and when a community goes into the map and clicks on their building, they can see their building from the registry's office, and they can click on planning, financing and support. We recommend that they start with the planning. This project was possible thanks to the Catalan regional government for social development, and we carried out this together with other companies like IREC, Díaz de Agost, Marcove. If we go into the planning module, what we see there is a refurbishing plan that is recommended, which could be basic or comprehensive or stage by stage, or you can also customize it. Here you see all of the different actions, and you see the energy outcomes of the current status of your building and what it would look like once it's refurbished, besides the environmental benefits and the costs of the intervention. So then if we go to the finance plan, we have the costs of the interventions, the subsidized costs. We've done this bearing in mind the current next generation funds, this obviously will have to be updated, and the types of loans with the attached interest rates and the amortization period. And for the support plan, what we are doing is to come up with a series of questions on the community in different areas: information, awareness, community organization, community management, and based on this diagnosis, we have grouped communities based on whether they're easy or difficult, following the different parameters that I won't go into details now, but if you want to, we can talk about this later. And so we come up with two support plans, one which is comprehensive and one which is basic. This is an in-person support plan where people have to go to the refurbishing actors and say, I need these actions, so I need to go and agree with my community to be able to take this refurbishment plan ahead. Why is this in-person support important? Well, we have worked in several municipalities. In past months, we've been working in l'Hospitalet de Llobregat, and we saw it was important to offer this in-person support because more than 70% of housing in Spain is a building where several families are living in, and that's why it's important for the community to be involved. We've identified social barriers, challenges like a lack of culture of investing in buildings. We have a high culture of investing in cars, but not in buildings. Also, the paperwork is complex, the information is fragmented, the difficulty in reaching agreements. There's a low community cohesion. We have a low energy efficiency, and that environmental awareness is still weak. And that is why we came up with this support plan, digitally and in person, as a tool for social management and for the communities to learn lessons and participate. We always say that buildings aren't the ones that use the energy, it's the people living in these buildings. We are the ones turning on our lights or our heating, and therefore having an energy culture is essential. So how can we do this? Well, we do it working directly with the communities, with workshops, we write customized reports, and we attend their community meetings. And the idea behind this is to design a house in a living space and not as an obligation to refurbish. And the context we had in L'Hospitalet are the Ciutat Comtal apartment blocks. It was the City Council of L'Hospitalet de Llobregat who came to us. It was also the City Council who funded the refurbishment. There was a neighbours movement that was asking for refurbishments because there were many structural issues with this apartment blocks. So in the first stage, we offered a training. First, we communicated in the neighborhood to consolidate a group of at least 15 people coming from different communities. They were the energy focal points for their communities, and they then had the knowledge which they had to pass on to their communities. We designed the process together with them to be able to meet their needs. Initially, our initial idea was that with these types of support programs, we usually work on energy culture, but in the end we talk about community management and energy refurbishment. But here, in this case, we saw there was a need to talk about community management and how to access European funds for the refurbishment. We didn't know quite where to start, we didn't know where to go or how to start off the refurbishment. And at the same time, it was extremely enriching because we were able to share this collective knowledge. We provided training and energy culture to improve the use of the building and refurbishment. And one specific goal, the problem is that to get the communities to commit to refurbishing the building, this allows you to work with the communities in order to achieve a greater cohesion. At the second stage, we drafted specific reports for each of the buildings, and then we visited each of the communities to present these reports, which looked at different possible interventions and all of the available subsidies that gave them information on their building. And these energy focal points were the ones who explained what they had learned during the course of the program. And I'll conclude by saying that as lessons learned from this experience, the Next Generation funds are a wonderful opportunity, but there's a lack of social support, and that poses a risk when it comes to consolidating the refurbishment plan. Therefore, it's essential to come up with a diagnosis of the communities. We must know that the role of architects is also a facilitating role, even if we have our limitations, because we haven't been trained in social aspects. So we need to know when we have to call on others for support. The in-person support is essential, but also digital tools can be very useful, and that the neighborhood offices play a key role because they are a physical place where people can go to find information. And to conclude, I'll say that the energy refurbishing plan has to change the way we relate to energy in order to achieve a social transformation. Thank you very much.
Moltes gràcies, Anaïs. Molt interessant això de...
Thank you, Anaïs. What you were mentioning about the book and the passport in order to understand buildings as a bag of materials for the future was very interesting. Also, so that this information will reach the communities. We'll go straight to Albert now. Good morning. I want to thank you for inviting us to this conference. In conferences like this one, or like the conference like the Architects Congress from last week, are a must because we find ourselves at a crossroads. I have a certain age. We probably find ourselves in the most important moment in history in the last 50 years, because in very soon, in 2030, Barcelona wants to be carbon free, and this is only 7 years away, and very important goals must be achieved, like never before the building sector has pursued. Therefore, we must discuss, we must motivate each other in order to do a lot in very little time. This is why Batec, which I'm representing today, was born from this challenge in our everyday work. We understood what was happening to us, these environmental promises that we've been trying to work for in the last 20 years are very difficult to achieve for different reasons that I'm going to expose today, but the legal regulations don't make it easy. Administration is not easy. This is why Batec was born, trying to find out which could be the ways in which we could make important steps forwards in this regard. Batec is focusing on energetic transition from a social perspective, and also it involves sustainability. The cooperatives that make up Batec means that each of them are experts in different fields, but overall, we want to come up with strategic plans for a change of paradigm. The main challenges that Europe is posing of decarbonization involve a change of model. We cannot keep on working like we have been working until now. This linear consumption, waste-producing model needs to be changed. We need to find strategic projects that will explain how to do this. For the moment, We've opened some work lines which will be broadened. One field that we'll be discussing today are the resource communities. We could even call them the life communities, not only energetic communities, but also resource and life communities. We need to transform communities, public, private actors, institutions that are grouping certain services within the world of architecture, trying to do something important, which is innovation labs, laboratories. There must be a place where things can be tested because the reality is not yet accepting these things. We need to find a space for them to be tested. And we all need to lobby. We need to organize ourselves in order to put pressure for things to happen. And finally, we need to work as a network. In Batek, we try to be cohesive and cooperative among the different sectors. One of these examples is the energetic community of La Bordeta in the Sants neighborhood in Barcelona, in the Sants district. Anaïs was saying whoever generates environmental impact are people, not buildings. And moreover, we believe that what must be rehabilitated are people and not buildings. Buildings must also be rehabilitated, but mainly it is the people. And this is something that Anaïs said, and we are also defending this view in Batek, not only from a social perspective, but we must involve resources and efforts in order to rehabilitate people so that buildings can be rehabilitated as well. We have a certain knowledge about innovation and technology. I think our main challenge is the social part, the social side. The energetic community, for me, as Anaïs already explained, is presenting the concept of sharing, which sounds kind of innovative because we are used to live in an individualistic way. But we must start to share things. We must start sharing. It will probably start with photovoltaic power. Photovoltaic power and solar energy would be probably the last strategy we need to apply. First of all, we need to think about what our needs are. We need to see what our needs are first. After that, we need to reduce the bioclimatic demand with greater ventilation, with more galleries, with better isolations. After that, we need efficient equipments with the energy, which will be a smaller amount of energy that we will need then. We will cover that with solar energy. If we start with solar energy, that would be starting off from the economic side. Because with little money, we are getting a good economic return. This is how it should be. Therefore, this would be an inverted pyramid, and we must keep on insisting in consuming less in general with the help of renewables. There's another important factor, which is management, which has to do with explaining to people that if they are managing their buildings better without spending €1, they can reduce the consumption of energy. And then efficiency comes in. Finally, unfortunately, we have bioclimatism, because this is where you have to do a starting investment that will be important, a big amount of money. But if you think about what is going to happen to your building in the next 30 years, you will understand where you are within these two pyramids, which weight you are giving to the economic part and which weight you are giving, or which importance you're giving to the environmental part. When it comes to La Bordeta energetic community, regarding that community, this is a success model from the start. And we have been tricking, so to call it, because we have already started. We have started with a project with communities that were already willing to live together and who already knew each other. They already knew each other, so we want to extend the project to other people, and a cooperative has been created. This is the legal form it has adopted, to which other activities will be added. The community is at the center, but there are many things happening around it. We're working with Some Energia to figure out what the cooperative mobility will be, how it will be done. We'll have an electric car. Obviously, we have the financing as well. The fact that we will be cooperating will make it easier to go and find some financing. Next generation on COP57 will be financing cooperators of ours and many other elements. The buildings that are part of this project are La Diversa, a housing cooperative on Constitución Street, which would be representing an old building from the beginning of the last century in the Sands district, and then La Borda building would be representing a modern building with efficiency criteria. This is also important, seeing how this La Borda building can be improved, in which ways. And then Social Economat, which is a food cooperative in the Sands district, in a tertiary building, La Lleialtat Sancenca, representing public facilities. They are working with the help of Batec, with our help, and together with other buildings in the neighborhood and with specific building neighbors who are already very interested in the projects. This is all. We can keep on discussing the model in the debate, questions and answers. But if you live within a square kilometer of La Bordeta, you can join us and you can become members of our cooperative. Thank you very much.
Gràcies, Albert.
Thank you, Albert. It's too bad that we don't live within a square meter of La Bordeta. Hopefully, these models will reach more and more people, these kind of models. Thank you for inviting me in the City Council of Barcelona. Representing the City Council of Barcelona. I'm just coming out of the flu. I hope my voice will not fail me. I didn't really have time to test the presentation, so before pressing play, I wanted to do a small introduction. The Efficient block of houses, the Illa Eficient, is a project that was launched 6-7 years ago, which wants to join energetic rehabilitation of housing buildings with the generation of solar energy for self-consumption, as well as a creation of a cooperative with people who want to become involved in the project. It's 8 buildings with 180 flats. The first was finished last month. 12 houses with a 40% of primary energy reduction and saving. We are around 17% now, because this is a protected building in the Eixample district, in this very center of Barcelona. We can work on the covers and roofs. The aerothermia has brought good results. And in February, the 30% of primary energy savings will be achieved. With the treatment of facades, of party walls, of roofs, and now we are working on 3 projects, which we are working on at the same time. 12 neighbors in one of the projects, the other one involves 14 neighbors, and the third one involves 16 neighbors. One of the challenges here has been to make 2 communities agree with each other about a party wall, a dividing wall, and about solar energy and solar panels that will be shared by both buildings. One of these communities has rights to flight, and the other one will be authorizing this other neighboring building to place the solar panels, to share them. So the social dimension to this project is has a big potential. So there were many reasons for saying yes to energetic rehabilitation. It wasn't just a matter of saving money or convincing people who are already convinced. For us, the challenge was to convince the people who are not convinced already. And in these communities, we have snipers, Sometimes there are just one or two who want to destroy everything or block everything. Most people might be in favor of the project. Some are neutral, but then there might be one or two who will go and block it all. So we have to count with that. We have things that have really working well. Property protection sometimes is a challenge. And this is an important point. How to find the balance between energetic efficiency, because the climate change is a reality. We've had a very hot autumn. We can see this with our own eyes. And then the balance of between that and preserving our own identity is something that we need to work on. But we need to still convince a lot of people who are not yet convinced. And it's not just an issue of money. So going back to my first point, two barriers were identified. One barrier was subjective in terms of emotional link with and connection with what was being done, and the other one was an administrative barrier. Architecture, engineering, legal, taxing, financial. A lot of different kinds of professional experts need to work together for this. I would like to share a fun video with you now, but it's about connecting with people, and it's just about explaining things to people and organizing workshops. Maybe some things might be basic for us, but sometimes we need to touch people's heart and tell them about the more basic things that we ourselves take for granted sometimes.
El tiren des d'allà mateix, no has de tocar res.
Sí, por fi. Tenia so. Li dono cap enrere?
Crec que el so era important, no? Precisament em deia, Cèlia.
Sí. Però bueno.
Sound team from solar energy, isolation workshop, solar energy workshop, reality, virtual reality glasses, sustainable models, sustainable modeling, presentation of the different models, it seems to be over. Well, this was just to explain that these advantages can be transmitted to people through emotional connection with people. Well, that can be a workshop where we were explaining how insulation works. It wasn't just acoustic insulation, but also technical insulation. How to make a garden roof. And maybe you can also ask the children to get involved and participate in a workshop. There was a fun workshop connecting music, loudspeakers, with Catalan gastronomy, bringing people closer to these solutions, but also with a little bit of bread and tomato and oil, with some Catalan food. In this way, we were transforming what might seem as an obligation into something that, for me, is a passion, sustainability. So communicating this to people so that they will say yes, but also want to willingly pay for it, then that's the challenge. We've carried out these workshops at the Polytechnic University of Barcelona, which is helping us with the validation of the goals, with the energetic efficiency measures, approval. These workshops have helped us accompany and meet these neighbors in order to explain something which is quite complex. The rehabilitation of a building, which involves a big process. The digital book of building has incorporated a green tag posing the question, why don't you make your building sustainable? You might have financing for it, but the first motivation is always a need, the IT, but they need the emotional will to do it. The green certificate will be their first motivation. This will give you not only well-being, but also money to reach the energetic community. As my colleagues were saying, it's not just a matter of the advantages given by energy saving by solar energy, but it is about creating a consumers' cooperative with legal, taxing, and other advantages. There are objective limitations which have to do with rehabilitation. Sometimes there is no only one subsidy. Sometimes you need a bidding with 3 or 4 buildings, and scalable criteria and scale economies can be applied there. You can also reach agreements with the workers, within the industrialists, when you're working on different projects, a bigger project, asking them to work at good prices, affordable prices, because we're talking big volumes. Also taxing issues. With the next generation funds, the taxing overcharge is reduced. People receiving subsidies sometimes might be ended up losing maintenance quotas. When it comes to financing, there are special financing programs. We have a very special credit for it, and when something is subsidized, the cooperative has a credit line that has been granted by the IDAE because they are an energetic community. Concerning legal issues, reaching agreements with architects, the installers, the construction company. This has to be done alongside with the neighbors, in agreement with the neighbors. This is more of a management issue and finance economic solutions. All the participants need to study every solution alongside with the professionals and experts of each sector. I have other things to say, but I think I've reached my deadline, my time limit. This was all to say that the Next Generation Fund are giving us a great opportunity, but as Anaïs was saying, they're not just about having money, but trying to reach people and having conversations with people. Thank you very much.
Isabella, quan vulguis.
Isabella, it's your turn. Thank you very much for listening to me today and for inviting me. Before telling you a little bit about what we're doing in detail, this is an important framework that we're working on in this forum. Habitat are in the center of Barcelona. Sometimes they call us the R&D of the Barcelona City Council. We're trying to find different ways of managing the city to make it more livable and more sustainable. Innovation is done through internal evaluation, and we want to work in a cross-cutting way with all the sectors of the cities. We want to accelerate innovation processes using the cities as a natural place for experimentation and research. And Barcelona is quite receptive when it comes to implementing this type of processes. We are starting different methodologies. Public procurement and subsidies, methodology, infrastructure, and training. I would like to focus on two today. Public subsidies with innovation and urban challenges. And we will also reach results which are aligned with what we have been discussing this morning. First of all, public subsidies to innovation. 3 years ago, we launched this project. And this subsidy line, Barcelona Proactive, to promote creativity when it came to coming up with new solutions to improve life quality in the cities. How to be the receivers of the militants from Batec, from Societat Orgànica, how to help finance economically, but also technically, help technically those initiatives that are generating positive impacts in the city and strengthening this economy of social and economic impact, which are linked to the challenges that we all have. What we are seeing is that with this subsidies line, it has been well received by the architect and urban planner community, because there are positive impacts on the cities, and these projects would never happen or see the light without these subsidies. There is a digital platform that has been promoted by collectively led by Incosol. Another one is a project presented to the Advanced Institute of Architecture in order to work on dividing walls made up by fruits and veggies. Another one has to do with a Raval district, a project together with the neighbors so that neighbors will be empowered with high construction solutions for the community spaces in the buildings. How to empower the communities. As you were saying before, the most important and the most difficult thing is to empower people to change the way people think. There are tools for it. If we cannot reach them from the public administration, we can at least give tools for things to happen. But this will only happen if we change our perspective, we start to do it more bottom up. like we do in Merge, generating the impacts that we are seeking from the administration. The last example is wiki housing. I think it's a very interesting concept. It has been promoted by Travel Tres as well as other people from the architecture ecosystem, which thinks about the ecosystem of new housing formats, together with a young collective between 18 and 35, for which the conventional housing market is not giving an answer. So we're trying to identify new demands in the use of housing together with them. Innovating also means starting a dialogue with the user, which would be this kind of collective. From the public administration, we don't do this often. But this project allowed us to turn around the design of the tools. This is a subsidy that we're launching every year. It's quite a lot of money, actually. But we have another one, another tool, Aturba. And it's an urban challenge. What we do from Habitat has to do with what you might have received in the form of spam emails. It is to understand what the state of innovation is, where we need to give an answer, and identifying the tool, testing a solution in a pilot test, and validating its functionality in order to see a potential future scalability. Sometimes with the tools that we have, we cannot reach the goals that we have set ourselves, especially in Barcelona, where we have set ourselves the goal of being carbon neutral in 2030. How to come up with new ways of making this new city? We do it through dialogue and discussion. How does a challenge work? We can start with an open dialogue involving different sectors. When it comes to architecture, we have also people coming from environmental and social and economy and engineering sectors to help us understand what the format should be like. And this is what the subsidy is also including their winners to the bid. There's a prototype test, and if it works, then it can be scaled. I'll give you an example, although the most recent one is the Panot example. We're now implementing the Green Axis City model, the Super Illa, the super block. The Panot has been focusing on 9 materials that are generating less emissions. They are more permeable and more sustainable, less polluting, and more consistent with the model of city that we are seeking. We've started an open dialogue with building, with the construction professionals, with the universities, with the research centers, and together we are testing a solution at the university, and hopefully we'll be advancing towards new construction material. In the administration, we want to force the ecosystem for these things to happen, or promote these things to happen. We're kind of forcing dialogue and forcing innovation among the different agents. And this is a different challenge that has just been presented by us. Lacat All Basan in Barcelona. How to generate ephemeris structures, light, modulable ephemeris structures in Barcelona that will make an energy efficiency and life better. We're thinking about a stock of housing built in the 50s and 60s, which have some construction problems and which need some solutions. There were high volumes of immigration in Barcelona all those years, and this is why buildings were built very quickly at the time. So how to be ambitious and to find a solution that will give an answer to this need? which has arrived to us in the Municipal Institute of Urban Planning. We launched a challenge thinking about a solution, starting from a block of housing to be regenerated that can be applied on the basis of modular kits, 2D or 3D, planning a volumetric growth, adapting ourselves to the new norms, allowing the change of volume as long as this will improve the energetic efficiency of the building. And this will involve a climatization kit and the extension of living space in the apartments, a kit for digital covered and solar kit, and also with a combination of these kits that will allow the building to improve its living conditions as well as its energetic efficiency. So we are asking for solutions which will improve the well-being and the health of the people living in it. They will improve resilience and many other advantages and benefits. We have received different projects. 3 of them have been shortlisted, and now the prototype of the solution will be started in March and April to see if really they are energetically efficient. If this is working, if this works, it will then be scaled. I'm sure Albert could help us take a look at this. One project is Regenerar Barcelona, presented by Cornatula and the Technical University of Barcelona, and another one is InnoFab with Pica Galera, by Pica Galera Architects. Only 2 of these projects are giving an answer to what we're asking for. There are new ways of giving an answer to the new built city. I would like to chat to Nuria about this. These figures that she was offering when she was telling us about the social and environmental repercussions of the construction sector. Yesterday, I was hearing about the weapons, the increase of 10% of energy prices, an increase of these prices would mean 0.6 increase of deaths. So this is involving actual loss of life in Europe. So it is necessary to reflect about this. These challenges need to be tackled. The challenge of build cities from different disciplines and perspectives in order to make not only a more livable city possible, but also more sustainable. This is all. Thank you very much.
It's very important that we look for innovation when looking at solutions that are on the market. And it's also interesting to hear all of these proposals, which are closely linked to the project we visited yesterday afternoon, or we heard about yesterday afternoon, where they were showing us the building block in Bordeaux, where they install these winter gardens or terraces, which may be related to this project. And now, if you like, we have the code on screen. I encourage you to ask your questions. We have a little less than 30 minutes, so I'll give you some time. I'll ask some initial questions, and then that gives you time to pose your questions using menti.com, typing the code you see on screen. Well, we've discussed many things. I think we could go on talking about these topics for a long time. But to kick off the debate and to prepare the conclusions, to make them available and synthetic, very often people ask us, okay, so it's difficult to refurbish a building in terms of energy when you have buildings that are listed perhaps, and there are restrictions as to what you can and can't do, and with people's lives. So in a very simple and concrete way, what would be the checklist for you of measures to improve the energy efficiency and the environmental footprint of buildings in our city? I'll give you all a possibility, but we can all, if you want to add on to this checklist. Well, I explained this in my presentation. I said that one thing is the environmental footprint, and then we have to do a reality check with the social component and the financial side of this. I think the first thing that must be done is to convince people who want to refurbish a building to do so. Otherwise, it makes no sense. It's about transforming the groups of owners who barely speak to each other, to turn them into a community, people who are willing to talk to each other. And that is why it's important to dedicate resources to convince the communities. And then there's the financial side, looking at how, based on the needs of the communities, they can make it more efficient without having to make a huge investment. And then there's the technical side, which is the part that I deal with, and it's the one that worries me the least. If you have concrete studies to look at what the technical priorities, whether you use the thermal inertia or not, finding ways of having natural ventilation. So I think this technical diagnosis is something we know how to do and we're good at doing, throughout the sector. I think what's most important are the two previous steps. And to be slightly controversial here, the concept of heritage is important. We need to overcome the aesthetic side of heritage and move into the more, to see what heritage teaches us from an environmental perspective. In some areas of Catalonia, maybe not the most populous ones, but 90% of the housing stock is built with building blocks, and it's been done so for 200 or 300 years, and we can learn a lot from that heritage, and we should use these techniques to be more sustainable. But then there's when talking of heritage, sometimes we focus a lot on the aesthetic side of it, and we have to bear in mind the environmental needs and requirements of today, because it's urgent.
Part del patrimoni dels edificis amb el patrimoni cultural.
I link the heritage of the buildings with our cultural heritage, and I don't know if I'll be answering your question, but rather I'll try answering the question I see on screen. Let's read out that question. In Barcelona, almost 40% of houses are rental properties, 40%. So how can we start refurbishment processes when the owner isn't interested in refurbishing the building, but the tenant is interested? Well, you wanted to answer something in relation to the question. You wanted me to answer your question? Well, we can try answering this second question. Yes. I think rehabilitating people. What Albert was saying about rehabilitating people, and I think we all agree on the need to do this. But this question here, I like especially because it's something we find very often, and when we go and work with communities, we encourage tenants to come to our sessions. At the end of the day, it's not just about refurbishing the buildings, it's also about creating an energy culture in society and being able to share this knowledge with everyone. And well, when it comes to tenants, I think there's a lot that can be done. It is true that unfortunately tenants cannot take decisions when it comes to refurbishing a building, and they can't put the money up front for this. But finding allies in tenants. Someone mentioned earlier on, I think you were saying that you were talking of snipers and allies. So if allies are tenants, that's fine. I think they must be involved in the workshops. At the end of the day, it's, you have to work in community bit by bit, whether they are owners or tenants. And so I think this question is extremely relevant. You wanted to say something, Isabella? Yes, I wanted to link it to what you are saying, not in coming up with concrete refurbishing solutions, but when we talk of rehabilitating people, we are looking at the theory of which is a conjunctural change. Basically, I mean, one thing is preach, empowering, educating, but a different thing is to doing something that enable a change of perspective. This is being done a lot in public policies. It's a silly example that has nothing to do with housing, but for instance, in China, they faced with a problem, and that is that people who use their bikes and cross the road when the light is red, but they've found a solution to this. So you can do things that help people change systematically. We from Ciudad Proactiva, with these subventions, we have been awarded a project on the data trust for energy and water, which makes the utility bills understandable to the users. And so you can become more aware on how to save, but not with communication messages, but rather by managing understanding the resources you're using. I think this change in mindset could be interesting when it comes to changing people's behavior. Sometimes we humans are the problem. Okay, so when we talk of refurbishment, when it's not an option, either because we are tenants or because we do not have the resources to cover the cost, what can users and the people living in these buildings do to change their habits? Sometimes they're lacking knowledge, or they're lacking ways of making this information understandable to all. Would it be useful perhaps to have a user guide on architecture so that we can reconnect to the places we live in to make the most of them? Reconnecting with this popular knowledge which had been conveyed from one generation to the next and has been lost, like when you should close your shutters or open the windows, or when you need cross ventilation, if you're lucky to have cross ventilation. Well, I'll link it to what Albert was saying before, the issue of bioclimatism, which would be kind of the first step. I mean, not consuming is the best way of saving. So my grandmother, I remember, said, okay, so it's sunny, I'll close my shutters so that the sun doesn't come in and the house doesn't heat up too much. But very often there are technical solutions that allow you to not have to use the resources. There are ways, at certain moments of maybe a mechanism that allows you to close the shutters automatically. Maybe when you're at work and you can't physically go there and close the shutter, you have technologies that should be included into this kit, or insulation, innovative insulation solutions that are overcoming problems. It's true, I am in favor of having a guide handbook to help its inhabitants to understand how the building works, because it will determine our energy consumption. So it's winter, okay, so let's cover up with a winter pajama to sleep. We need to make people's life easy. And here I link it with the issue of tenants. I think that if we explain and convince society at large, you won't be able to rent a property unless if the tenants are demanding this, you know. It's like the energy certificate. If you have A, B or C, the flat will be more expensive or cheaper when you come to renting it or buying it. But if the tenant is, all tenants asked for these measures, then the owner would have to do it. Because if you don't make this change and if you don't convince both tenants and owners to do this, they should do it regardless of the price. Well, I think data tells us that in 2026, well, I don't know if it's 2026 or 2030, but all buildings will have to have a minimum standard for them to be rented or sold. Well, the certificate determines the price based on the location and the size. These the parameters. But in other countries, they say yes, location, square meters, but also what is their energy certificate. Even if the certification system doesn't have bioclimatism into account, such as rooftop gardens, well, in the case of the La Bordeta energy community, we started off with people who are already aware and want to share. But at the same time, via training, or we will publish some user guides for the different buildings. Because as I said earlier on, besides solar energy is the cheapest way of reducing your energy bill by 20 or 30% just by management. And when it comes to housing, well, it'll depend on how people's behaviors are, but you can achieve 10 or 15% saving with zero cost. You just have a user guide to get people to know it, and you can raise awareness. So I think it's essential to look at how people live in their buildings. I'd like to add to that when it comes to this 10 or 15% utility bill savings for housing. We've done a lot of work at schools, and at schools there is an obvious saving. But when we work with communities with energy cultures, we see consumption patterns are low. We usually work with people who are living in energy poverty, who do not consume much energy. So what we need to do is work on comfort measures, thermal comfort measures, and so we have a list of actions to look at what actions should be carried out without spending money or refurbishing. But in any case, I think sometimes these user guides, if they're not accompanied with workshops up front, people just don't read these user guides or they don't understand them. So I think it's very important to have living experiences. So people say, okay, bring me a picture of your apartment at 12 a.m. and at 10 a.m. and let's look at how the sunlight reaches the inside of your flat. These are the things that make people to feel the sense of belonging in their home, so that for them to know their homes directly. The more the learning experience is based on experience, the better. It's much better than just having a printed leaflet. Okay, I see we have another question from the audience for Anaïs and Isabella.
Do you collaborate in workshops to provide new solutions, or just tech residents and communities and to change behaviors? What new solutions have they taught you?
precisament el que nosaltres intentem fer des de la vessant d'innovació és...
Well, what we tried doing is inverting this, turning this mechanism around. I don't have to say anything. I get people with skills together, with mediators, with facilitators, to meet with the people living in the place, to come up with joint decisions and I've learned a lot. We have a list of ideas that was edited by the UPC with construction solutions for communal areas, staircases, rooftops, with the logic of urban resilience, thinking bottom up for this urban regeneration, as well as energy communities. There's a new project on how to formalize an energy community for solar energies, but with a mechanism that is established. And in this regard, for us, we need to open up the discussion, because the more people participate in the co-design process, the solution will be found quicker and will be better. And the end user, we're talking of people living in buildings, play a key role in this mechanism. They must learn, but they need to explain. We need to explain as well. I don't have more to add. You said it all, I think, Isabella. And we don't do the construction work. We don't come up with joint solutions. But communities know a lot about their buildings, and they know what these solutions could be. Very often they've already talked with professionals and they know what possible solutions they have. We move in as a neutral team there just to build trust so that they can ask us anything, knowing that we aren't there trying to sell anything to them. And I think that's what helps building this trust in themselves. Yesterday we were talking of gentrification and speculation, different rent control systems from around Europe, and how unfortunately sometimes some proposals to improve the urban environment, which are necessary in light of the climate emergency and to make cities more inhabitable for society. We were saying how unfortunately many of these interventions can be a catalyzer for gentrification, because the speculative market turns things around. And if we don't have a good use plan, gentrification very often happens inevitably. The same can happen when refurbishing buildings. It can have these unwanted collateral effects, like the costs of refurbishment usually then lead to an increase in rent prices and has a social impact on the population living, renting accommodation. Maybe we even said that maybe we should look at the energy certification and the pricing of property, whether it's for sale or for rent, but it have negative impacts because only those who have more money will be able to access more comfortable and energy efficient buildings. Does this mean we shouldn't refurbish buildings and improve the cities? How can we avoid these negative externalities? Or when you receive public funding, which should be the social criteria to ensure the right to housing for the people living in this? Well, to answer you and to answer this question, one thing is the price and another thing is the value. I think they're different things. Usually people, when you look at price and value, they link them together. But with an energy certification, and I'm just trying to move it into reality, and here we're discussing to find solutions. So this social, how do you include the social component into the energy certification? Maybe it was something we should look at how to regulate this, but what I've said, the price and value are the same, they say. So how is the market working? Why shouldn't we include the social aspect in the energy certification? This question is, how can you make compatible things when you receive subsidy? Okay, so let's imagine you make an effort to do refurbishment to make your house more energy efficient, you receive a subsidy, but then you then have capital gains on the value of your property, and you have to pay more income tax. So that's why it was distinguishing value and price. It's something we should discuss, not just amongst ourselves, at other levels, at a regulatory level, when it comes to taxation and compatibilities. I'm just saying how the social aspect could be included into an objective criteria, which is energy certification as an element of value. So Bisoi said yes. The decision-making process, I'm talking in marketing terms, but also in social terms, on how can we reach. You were saying that you don't move in to sell them anything, you give them an objective piece of advice, but maybe that should help them reach and take a decision. Otherwise you think, oh yes, it's great, but very often the communities take months before they reach a decision. And going back to your question, for me, one of the answers is how do we balance out the inclusion of social criteria into an objective parameter? There is a way of regulating. That's my contribution. Okay, so I think this could be applied to many other aspects of sustainability, because we are part of an unsustainable society. So change must come everywhere. It either is imposed, like top down. So let's imagine there are citizen representatives who are brave and to stop speculation. This is being done, and they're trying, and very often this comes up against the legality of the concept, unfortunately, in my opinion. But you can do it by regulating the market to avoid the speculation and gentrification, or another way of doing it is for citizens and users to have a greater awareness of the value they want to give to sustainability. There are these two sides which I think have to go hand in hand. You need a minimum threshold where basic rights are guaranteed, and then on the other hand, we start reducing our environmental impact. I think that's basic. And then we also have to raise awareness amongst citizens that this change is needed. But this has to be done from all areas, and very often we look at the administration and blame the administration for not doing enough, but from the bar of architects that Anaïs and I represent, they have to push for architects to learn more about environmental aspects and to help convince the people we're working for on the need to do this. It has to be a joint effort, and innovation is really important. It is indeed a difficult and complex challenge. We have to take it step by step, but there is a sense of urgency. Okay, so at the end of the day, one of the things that's clear is that one of the fundamental pillars is to raise awareness among professionals working in the sector and in population at large. We'd love to continue talking about this, because there are many things that we haven't solved, and there are, I'm sure, many questions, but I think it's time to wrap up this session. So, I think what's clear to us is that there is a social and environmental aspect to rehabilitation, and we hope this will be integrated into our city, especially in the field of architecture. Faculties of architecture, the Bar of Architects, and we should give us the tools and knowledge to develop this task. It's different when it's talking of new buildings, but it's very useful. It's realistic. Today we're talking of being practical, being realistic. We have to, and it's urgent, of course, in the times we are living. I come from a generation of architects who came out of our studies without knowing how to refurbish a building, but we had designed these beautiful, large, multifunctional buildings that are the ones we want to build. But the reality is that since the real estate bubble and the financial crash in 2008, the sector has completely changed. I think refurbishment is a need, and let's hope more and more people are aware of this need and we can raise greater awareness so that we can move towards a type of architecture and a city that is more responsible from a social and environmental standpoint. Thank you to the four of you for being part of this panel on rehabilitation with social and environmental criteria, and thanks to our audience. We will now take a short coffee break and we will be back at 11:30 for today's second panel, which will be on the next generation funds. Please remember that after these panels, we also have a series of visits to different projects in Barcelona. If you haven't yet registered, there is still time to do so for some of the visits. You just have to go to the meeting point at the entrance to register. So that's all on my side. Thank you very much and see you back here in half an hour.